problem is that the things that are cheap to run, like hydro and wind, cost a lot up front. And the things that cost not very much up front, like gas, are expensive to run, right? And that's a classic problem in economics, right? Or in business, or in life, right? Fixed costs and variable costs. So what we need to do is figure out a way of amalgamating those two kinds of numbers into a single number that will tell us what's expensive and what's not, right? Okay, and how are we gonna do that?
I wonder, when you look at optimization, if you have to kind of build in a hassle factor or political will or something, optimization, which has a cost too.
If you take the cost of a degraded environment, health costs for people who live in the area that's going to be polluted, the costs of losing a forest, I think you could finally reach some numbers.
I would go through systematically each of these and give at least a quick evaluation of what the cost-benefit analysis would be in the long term for each opportunity.
That the longer it takes to go through the land use process and deal with the politics, you lose money. So what is the least politically neutral of all of them? Because you have the least resistance politically.
And that relates to the hassle factor too. What we want here, I haven't been able to draw another single number on this board since I started, right? What we want is a total cost expressed in terms of dollars per megawatt hour, right? Then we could compare, and we'll start worrying about that other stuff on that other board in a second. But first, we have to just know what the basic private costs are, not reflecting externalities or anything, just reflecting Carla's time value of money, right? And how are we gonna do that? Well, this is in dollars per megawatt, and we need to get a number that's in terms of dollars per megawatt hour. And so we have to have some way of transforming these numbers into some other thing. We can call it a capital charge that is going to be in terms of dollars per megawatt hour, not in terms of dollars per megawatt. Now, how are we going to do that? Why is wind power relatively expensive? It's because you can't run the damn things all the time, right? These things you get to decide, I'm going to turn it on, I'm going to turn it off. The wind blows or it doesn't, and so your capacity utilization is lower. And that makes it more expensive in terms of dollars per unit of output. How do you increase the capacity utilization of a windmill? By designing the turbines so that they can turn in lighter winds, and so they don't have to shut down when the wind speed gets too high, which is an equally big problem, especially in places like Texas, where sometimes the wind is blowing really fiercely and they have to shut the things down. If you have a better designed turbine that can, like sailors know this, I'm not a sailor, they can feather into the wind at different angles, depending on how fast the wind is blowing, you can increase the capacity of the turbine. Every time you produce a megawatt hour of coal, of electricity from coal, you put about a ton in the air. So the fracking revolution is really what has made coal uncompetitive, even in places like Chile. I mean, Chile is like the worst place to burn gas. Why? Because you've got to bear all of these costs, right? If you have a gas plant in Texas, it just costs $3, right? And $3 a million BTUs turns out to be like $20 per megawatt hour. So you add the $20 to the 13, and you get something like 33. This is why, like, the Texans have it, like, Texas is a very fortuitous place to live if you're an energy consumer, right? Because they're awash in gas, and gas is now super cheap, and plus it's super windy. So wind is super cheap. So think about this. This is like, he's contemplating these numbers, which are in the 70% range. He really wants to build these dams, but as we don't have really time to discuss, he won't have time to do it. He won't be able to do it because of the hassle factors and so on. And so he's thinking about sort of $75 power. And in Texas, we're talking about 30. This is great. Like, this is a huge boom, right? It's an extraordinary thing. Like, you don't think everybody knows that wind and solar and batteries are making enormous technological progress, and they're just screaming down these learning curves. Everybody says, oh, that means they're going to put the fossil guys out of business. Meanwhile, the fossil people aren't just standing still, right? The picture of energy markets that the renewable people like to paint is that you've got the fossil fuels here and you've got the renewables going down like this, right? But that's not what's happening, because the fossil people are scared of this curve and they're screaming down as fast as they can to try to stay ahead of the renewables, which is great for us consumers, but maybe not so great for the overall planet, right? Because we're going to keep using those fossil fuels. The things I want you to take away from this, some of them are like, energy systems are sticky because of this investment coordination problem. That's one thing. A second thing is the economics change a lot in a relatively short amount of time, right? Like the numbers that we put on the board, the Vikram Blasty said they basically seemed sensible for 2012, now have been turned on their heads, right? But we still have all the capacity that we installed when the prices were different. And the assets last a long time, and it will be hard for new technologies to displace the old ones when the old ones have the advantage that they've already sunk all the costs. So they're only thinking about variable costs. And they also have the advantage of incumbency in the political arena, right? So you're thinking about how fast renewables will supplant fossils. The answer depends in part on the United States Senate and who has more clout in the United States Senate, the fossil people or the renewables people. So it's an uphill struggle. Like this idea that we're gonna, I mean, everybody who talked about this transformation in the last 2 days said it would be hard, but they didn't really look too hard at how hard it would be. And I think we have to be realistic. So this case is, I think, a useful complement to the other things that you did over the past couple of days. We talked about science, we talked about economics, we talked about public policy, we talked about Rebecca was really talking about organizational behavior. This is a different lens on the business problem, right? And the issue is that any business leader has to reconcile the things that Rebecca was saying with the reality, or at least the imagination of numbers like these. And that reconciliation process is not as easy as people who care about the environment would like it.